The problem with facing the Sicilian is that despite your best efforts to counter something like the mainline dragon, it's easy to go astray on move 14 and be checkmated by move 20. That's why the c3 Sicilian is an excellent choice, because after just 2 moves you have your opening on the board. Has it got a good pedigree? You bet. Michael Adams plays it, and Anatoly Karpov. And you know, world champion Garry Kasparov has even lost to it. The good thing about the c3 Sicilian is that, if in doubt, white's going to play d4 and take over a centre, so black has to think of something to do. Perhaps the main line is to counter with 2d5. This is all very well, but the white response has been finely tuned. Let's see what happens. E takes d5, queen takes d5. Although this is played at the highest level, it can cause problems to those whose defensive techniques aren't up to, say, Anatoly Karpov. White proceeds with d4, and his ambition is to chase that exposed queen. When this happens, black's development frequently becomes retarded and he can suffer a swift beating. The standard move is knight f6, and after white brings his own knight to f3, the path diverges. The first and most common move is e6, with the idea of bishop e7 to castle kingside. Now white can proceed in a rather predictable fashion, following the books with bishop e2, with a solid position and good prospects of advantage. But we want to be more adventurous than that. My own recommendation in this position is a move that I've played several times with success, and that's knight bd2. A little crafty move that sets black problems straight away, and the idea is simply bishop c4 attacking that queen. For example, I've seen people respond knight c6, bishop c4, the queen is forced to retreat to d8. After knight b3, white has a space advantage which can soon be converted into an attacking formation that soon puts black under intense pressure. Next up is bishop g4, an annoying pin which most references refer to as the reason why c3 Sicilian should not be played. But of course this is purely because they all recommend the slow but solid bishop e2. In this case, I'm going to show you the latest move, the latest fashion, and the one that's got black trembling around the world. Ironically, it's a very simple move. D takes c5. This move has only recently even been considered, because everyone used to think that queen takes queen, followed by king takes queen, gives black the superior ending because the king is exposed. However, as even Grandmaster John Nunn found out, the pawn on c5 is the real key to this position. It's very difficult for black to get it back. Currently, this is thought to be a pretty good ending for white because basically he's a pawn up and black has to really fight to try and get any compensation. We will also be looking at Gallagher's recommendation knight c6. Now in the majority of cases this will transpose after knight f3. However, those with Gallagher's book on beating the anti-Sicilians will now walk into a line with c takes d4. This is all very well, but the latest theory has in fact condoned this move and you could be on your way to a very easy point. White replies c takes d4, and the idea, which we will explore later, is simply knight c3 to knock away that queen. Another way for black to stop white getting everything his own way is to try knight f6. This rather odd looking move is kind of like an Alekhine's because that knight will be chased around the board after e5. Considered one of the main lines, the idea is to encourage white to overstretch the pawns and then counter-attack. This can work, but also white does get a space advantage which to those who are not so good at defending can cause trouble. For example, if the knight comes to d5, white continues to expand in the centre with d4, and the usual move here, and perhaps the only move, is to take it. C takes d4. At this point, there are many moves for white to choose from. The normal move here is knight f3. This is all very well, but it does involve remembering a huge amount of material. I prefer a move recommended by Grandmaster Ian Rogers from Australia of simply queen takes d4. Immediately hit that knight and make black make the decision on how to defend. The good news about this position is that black does in general find it very difficult to get his pieces out. Normally with a knight attacked, the obvious move is e6. However, after knight f3, it's white who finds it much more easy to develop. In some lines, it can also be useful to bring the queen across to the king's side for a lightning attack. Some Sicilian players sometimes think they're going to play a French after you play c3 and play e6. This is hardly the sort of move a natural born dragon player will want to play, but if he's read his little book and he thinks this is the right move, that's what you're going to get. In fact, it's totally alien to Sicilian players who like to counter-attack and swashbuckling stuff, so normally white is very well in this variation. White proceeds to take over a centre with d4. If in doubt, play d4. The main line goes d5. White immediately takes it, e takes d5, and black takes with e takes d5. Now the stage is set for white to proceed very smoothly. Knight f3, black responds in kind, knight c6, and now bishop b5 with a slight edge, maybe a bigger edge even for that, because white just intends to castle quickly and then home in on this weak d5 pawn. There's always going to be players with the black pieces who just can't be bothered to learn the theory, and one way out for them is to play 2d6, a very quiet, nothing move frankly. So once again, we just get on with it. d4. Now they come to their senses. White is threatening simply to take, d takes c5, and exchange queens. So therefore they have to be a little bit more positive. One way to do this is knight f6. However, I'm going to recommend in this position a bishop d3, holding the centre with a good game for white. For example, c takes d4 is the normal move, c takes d4, g6, knight f3, and white can look forward to a pleasant middle game. Next in line is a move designed for those who are mad, bad and dangerous to know. The amazing but playable queen a5. What on earth is going on here? Well, there is sense to this move. If white quickly responds with d4, as we've been talking about, then the smile on black's face will be as big as a Cheshire cat, because after c takes d4, whoops, we can't play c takes d4 because of the king is pinned. Therefore, black's got his little trick in, and after queen takes d4, black is happy here because white doesn't have his central pawn dominance as usual, and knight c6 can hit the queen. However, there's always a way around such amazing moves, and perhaps one of the most forthright and direct moves is to have a little smile and play a3. This simple but effective move is good because the threat is d4, c takes d4, and then b4 to block that pin. The queen moves away, for example to b6, c takes d4, and once again we have our natural superiority in the centre. I will finish off a video with a look at b6, an idea taken away from the Owen's defence. The idea is simply bishop b7 to put pressure on e4. However, once again, black comes under a certain amount of pressure because it's rather cramped. There's not much room to develop the pieces. As usual, it's d4 to the rescue. Bishop b7, bishop d3, knight f6 to hit that pawn once again. Queen e2 defends the e-pawn, and white has a really easy way to continue. Just simply knight f3, castle kingside, and then try to stifle all of black's opportunities. And the game I'm going to show you is the classic example of this. You won't believe it. d5 is one of black's main lines and has to be taken seriously. However, white continues in normal fashion and can hope to gain an advantage straight from the opening. Queen takes d5 is natural and best. d4, knight f6, knight f3, and now the standard and most played move, e6. This is where the secret weapon comes into play. Knight bd2, hardly seen, but when played, strikes with vengeance at black's position. In this game, we're following Smitterdil Ernst, two GMs fighting it out blow by blow. When your opponent scuttles home after the game, wondering where this new move came from, the first thing he would probably do is look in a reference book, perhaps Nunn's chess openings. He would look in vain though, because it's not even mentioned. But why is this? Why is one of the moves played by a number of GMs not included? Well, the reason is fashion. I've played it myself even. In fact, someone said to me, why are your games not on the databases of the computers? And the reason is because I've played this move mainly in weekend tournaments, where the onus is not putting the score sheets on the internet, but more likely in the rubbish bin. Therefore, even my games are secret on this. The dilemma in this position for black is trying to make it up as they go along. For example, in this position, the Swedish Grandmaster Tommy Ernst decided to take things cautiously and just get his piece developed. Pretty good advice, but after knight c6, that queen started moving around the board. Bishop c4. Now where to put it? The queen is obliged to retreat, otherwise it would just be attacked even more. So queen d8 was played. Now, knight b3. This is one of the key moves. White managed to get all his pieces developed, whereas black is still standing on the original squares. The pawn is attacked, so naturally c takes d4. The game continued. Knight b takes d4. That looks sound enough. And now knight takes d4. A little exchange of pieces, but there's one thing that we should watch out for. After this exchange, black's only got one piece developed, whereas already these two pieces are much more commanding. And also it's easy to castle just in one step, whereas black still has to get this bishop out. Black now played bishop e7 to facilitate castling. Now white, instead of castling measly, played a rather crafty little move, queen e2. The reason I like this is because it stops e5. There's no point exchanging queens early when our main ambition is to attack. Black, being a GM, simply castled, not worried about anything. Likewise with white, and that's the point. Everyone's trying to get the pieces out, but with the queen on e2, these rooks are already coordinated. Whereas black, let's have a look over here. This is doing nothing, and the bishop is still dormant. These are things that black's got to try and work out what to do. Whereas white plan, just get on with it, get the pieces out, and let's get attacking. Consequently, bishop d7, a developing move, but it's not really doing anything much. Bishop f4, and this is what I like. The point is, you want control of the e5 square. The bishop's going to be plonked in e5 at some point, and then maybe even exchange this knight, which is defending the entire king side. Black's idea is to try and get some counter chances on the queen side. It can work, but it's kind of slow. And I think we're going to find out why it's particularly slow in this game. a6. Natural, but is it good enough? Rook a d1. Already the pin on the d file is making the black bit nervous. Queen's under threat there. So, why not move it? Queen a5. Sensible stuff. Even more sensible is just to move another rook into the centre. Well, it looks okay from white's point of view. It's got his pieces all developed. But how about black? Well, these bishops on e7 and d7, they look nice enough, but are they actually doing anything? They're very defensive. So this is great for white. He can get on with whatever attacking notions he's got. And boy, he's got a lot. Just wait and see. Rook fe8. Bishop e5. Now the reason why I particularly like this move is because this queen over here is just a spectator nowadays. Before, it had maybe grand hopes of playing a big part of a game by leaping over here to h5, exchanging queens, trying to take away the pressure for the attack. But now, sad and lonely on a5, that's what it is. Rook a d8. Now this is all very well, but black's counter chances just haven't got going. Now, if someone said, what move do you really want to play? Do you really want to play? It'd be rook d3. Brilliant stuff. But why not bring that big rook over to try and squash black? Remember, only this knight is defending, and that's on the verge of being captured by this bishop at any moment. So black's in real stuck here. Bishop c8. It doesn't look healthy, but that rook is now charging along the d-file. The fact is, black just seems to be playing a waiting game, waiting to see how he's going to be crushed. And I think Smitadel is going to give him a helpful hand by playing rook h3 to give him a good idea how. Already, these pawns are looking perilous, particularly h7, because we're going to take on f6. So how to get around this? Well, one way is maybe to reroute that knight to f8. It takes time, but it can be done. It's a knight d7. The problem is that white has all these pieces directed against the king, the rook, the bishop, and now the queen comes into the game. Queen h5. This pawn is looking decidedly unhealthy, but the whole point of this is to play knight f8. So there we go. It's at this point where white normally just completely goes astray, hasn't got a clue how to continue the attack, it gets repulsed and he loses. But in this case there's a big move available. Knight f5. Throw those gold coins onto the board now. Why is it so good? Well, another piece is added to the attack. This g7 pawn looks decidedly ill, and if he's daft enough to take it, e takes f5. Then the queen swoops in, queen takes f7, king h8, queen g8, and it's good night. With the whole of white's army bearing down on the king, it's up to black to gamble. Looking around, it's difficult to find a good move, but queen c5 puts the question to white. The c4 bishop's on pre, what to do next? Should he take on g7, giving up the piece? Or maybe there's a better move. No prizes for finding a better move here. b4. Doesn't care, gives up a bishop, if only to move that queen away from where the action is. Queen takes c4, nice little gift. So what happens now? Perhaps you take on g7? No. Prepare to launch yourself into space. Queen h6. Oh my god. What's going on here? Well, queen takes g7 is a major threat. And if takes, we get a round of applause. Knight takes h6, mate. That king's got nowhere to go. Well, it's looking pretty dismal, but there's one way out. Queen g4. Try to pick up as many pieces for your queen as possible. Nice idea, but does it work? Rook g3. Bishop f6. This is desperate stuff. Bishop takes f6. E takes f5. Well, this is a surprise. Suddenly, is this a back rank mate on pre? What's going on here? Have the tables turned? No way. Queen takes g7. Hurrah. This is stunning stuff. Black's obliged. Queen takes. Rook takes. The king forlornly hides in a corner. And now, a little bit of class. He puts another piece on pre. Rook g4. Checkmate. I had this position against the Egyptian international master Fatin, and he tried to sneakily improve on the game between Smitador and Ernst. So he rattled through these opening moves. Knight c6, bishop c4 as usual. The queen goes back. Knight b3, c takes d4. This all looks very familiar, I'm sure. Knight takes d4. Knight takes d4. We return the compliment. Knight takes d4. Bishop e7. Now once again queen e2. Castle. Castle. And now the prepared move was knight d5. The idea is to stop bishop f4 to e5, which in the other game just absolutely crushed black. So it's got a lot of sense behind it. However, there's one drawback. That's the d file. Rook d1. How to cope? Well, it's not easy. There are lots of tricks and traps. I mean, for example, maybe white's going to play knight f5, and then if pawn takes, that knight's hanging with a miserable pawn structure for black. So you just tried rook e8, see what happened. Now, if I play knight f5 now, bishop f8, black's escaping, so I thought I'll put a bit more pressure on him. Bishop b5. Let's see what he does. Now, if bishop d7, then moves like c4 are rather nasty, because that pin is getting bigger and bigger. For example, bishop takes b5. Knight takes b5, and oops, what can happen next? Well, yeah, black's lost an entire piece. Now, black's in a bit of a quandary here. He doesn't really want to move back, but it's probably the only move. Rook f8. So now I can get on with my plan. c4. Knight f6. Now, actually, afterwards, the Egyptian did tell me he saw what was coming, but he thought he could hang on. The only problem is, when you give up your queen, it normally spells disaster, because minor pieces just aren't enough to cope with any forthcoming attack. Let's look. Knight takes e6. Now, black decided to go for it. Queen takes d1 check, giving up his whole queen just for 2 pieces. Well, I was happy to oblige. Queen takes d1. And now, bishop takes e6. Now let's see what's going on here. Well, black does have some compensation, but at the end of the day, he doesn't have much counterplay. I'm the one dictating this game. Bishop g5. a6. Bishop a4. Well, bishop takes c4. He's got another pawn back, but the problem is, it's not really doing anything. Bishop c2, and a familiar sight has reached us. h7 is under pressure, and once again, the bishop on g5 is being used to attack the knight on f6. So at any point, white can remove this knight from f6 and clear a way for white to attack on h7. Do you think the attack can take some time? Well, look at this. Rook a d8. Natural moves. Queen f3. Once again, that queen is getting closer and closer to its intended victim, the black king. Bishop d5, forcing me along a merry route towards the king. Queen g3. Now what to do here? It's not so easy. I'm threatening bishop h6. I'm threatening all sorts of nasty little moves. So why not attack on the queen? Except this one's fatal. With a smile on my face, queen d3. Oops. If g6, the bishop on e7's hanging, and if knight f6, the running manoeuvre has already been outlined. We simply take it. Bishop takes f6. Black responds with bishop takes f6 himself. And now queen takes h7. That's it. Checkmate. Before we finish this section, I want to show you what to do against the obvious move, c takes d4. It also gives me an excuse to show you another one of my games. Once again, bishop c4 comes into play. The queen retreats to d8. Knight takes d4. There's no point giving him a free pawn after all. Bishop e7. Now, the more astute of you will notice that after knight here, we have a very similar position to the other games. So instead of playing knight to b3 to d4, it's gone from another route, but essentially it's the same sort of position. In this example, played against Polliger in Schorneck, Germany, my opponent acted swiftly. Queen c7. Once again, queen e2. The key here is I'm developing the same pattern. The queen once again on e2, and I'm going to castle kingside. The knight's from the same position. So the good news about this is, if in doubt, follow the same plan. Black continued in familiar fashion by trying to start something on the queen's side. a6. I castled. He responded likewise. Rook e1. Well, if you've seen from me other examples, the idea is just to bring the pieces out, and I follow that pattern exactly. b5. Bishop b3. And now knight c6. Well, I decided to chop that one off. Knight takes c6. Queen takes c6. Knight e5. Queen c7. And by now, a familiar move, bishop g5. And once again, we're going to want to take this on f6 at some point. And now my plan was quite simple, and indeed successful. I intended to play bishop c2 in a minute, followed by maybe queen d3, or, if he's really daft and not responded, bishop takes f6, bishop takes f6, and now queen e4, hitting not only h7, but this rather sad looking rook in the corner, causing the end of the game. Just to sum it up, I think white's got really good attacking chance in this position. Bishop c2 is coming, followed by queen d3. Queen can zoom along to take part on a kingside offensive. It's good stuff. And if you're really bored of that, you could even play a4 to break up that pawn structure. In the last variation, black was playing e6 and entombing the bishop, which consequently led to various problems in development later. So therefore, another idea is simply bishop g4, hitting the knight, the natural defender of d4. Now, in the past people have played bishop e2, but my move, and the move that is the latest trend, d takes c5. Now at this point, black's got the choice, exchanging queens, going for the ending, a pawn down, or simply recapturing. Let's look at queen takes c5. Now this gives us a chance to show why it's not a good idea to bring a queen out early, because we can force it back and gain time by attacking it. For example, knight a3. Now if black responds normally, for example knight c6, but knight b5 is a bit of a hassle. Look at that, knight c7 with checkmate is on the horizon. Therefore black routinely plays a6 to stop the knight encroaching on the queenside position. This gives white the opportunity to start harassing that queen. Bishop e3, natural and good. The queen has to go back, queen c7, and then white continues in aggressive fashion, h3, kick that bishop. Now if bishop takes knight, then simply queen takes, preparing to castle queenside, gives white the advantage of the two bishops, and more importantly, black is still suffering from retarded development. The bishop retreats to h5, and now queen a4 check, yet another piece being developed. Now it looks a bit odd, why not b5 and chase away the queen? Let's try it, b5. However, bishop takes b5 check solves that dilemma straight away. After a takes b5, white can take on a8. Queen takes a8 with a clear advantage for white. Knight bd7 to block the check. Of course, if queen c6, then thump out bishop b5 on the board, and that's the end of the game. Okay, so why not just castle queenside now? And to sum up in this position, white's got all his pieces just about on the board. The king, the hapless king, is still in the middle over here. White has a very nice position here. For example, one of the ideas is to play g4, push that bishop back a little bit, and maybe why not bring this bishop into the game and once again chase that wretched queen which has got no place to hide. Basically, white's just plainly better here. After d takes c5, black can enter the ending, but this time it's not going to be a dull, monotonous affair, because white's got this extra pawn, and to get it back, black's got to play very energetically and very accurately. That combination is not so easy. For example, e5 looks obvious, attacking the pawn. b4, might as well defend it. Now in this case, Larry Christensen, the top American player, played knight c6, relying on active pieces as compensation. But a pawn's a pawn. The game continued. King c2, knight d5, bishop b5. Suddenly it's black who's got to defend his pawn. f6. And now a sneaky but nice move, king b2. Now what's the idea of that? Well, the point is, is that if a5, white can just play a3 without worrying about the trick of a takes b4 and the loose rook being a problem. So you can simply even take back this way, a takes, because this rook is now defended. To give you an idea of what sort of position can come out of this opening, let's follow a few more moves. Bishop e7, bishop e3, just developing, no props. Bishop takes f3, g takes f3. Okay, so we've compromised our pawn structure slightly, but the fact is he's given up a bishop and he's no nearer getting back his pawn. a5, and wait for it, a3, of course. Black castle's queenside. Rook g1. Well, he still hasn't got his pawn back. g6. King c2. A little shuffle. But the point is, where's black's counterplay? The answer, nowhere. f5. Okay, let's take this knight off the board. Bishop takes c6. B takes c6. And now, instead of bishop g5 as played in the game, Christensen himself recommends c4. After knight takes e3, check, f takes e3, he has to admit that white is better. So it's back to the drawing board for Larry. Now we're going to look at this line in slightly more detail. Of course it's a pain to have to learn the exact moves, but in this case it's probably necessary. Just bear with me. e5, once again attacking that pawn. Okay, let's defend. Now e4. Now before you start panicking thinking you've lost a piece, there is a way out of this. It's been played by numerous players. In fact, white comes out rather considerably better. The key move is h3. Because of course if the knight is taken on f3 by the pawn, then we can play h takes g4 and get our piece back. Simple as that. After knight takes g4, the jury is still out on the best way for white to respond, because basically the emphasis is that white's already better. However, it'd be a bit mean to leave him in the lurch here, so I suggest king e1, simply defending f2. Now black doesn't want white to take on f3, so continue the pattern, f takes g2, bishop takes g2, and the point is why this line isn't really liked by black. This swooping bishop along the diagonal, not pleasant. Knight c6 is an attempt at sort of hanging on, and I think we can sum up even here, because white's got the two bishops, a few open files. Admittedly black's got a pawn back, but these pawns on the queen side are rather quick. b5, c6 is coming in, white's better. Bishop h5 is a consistent move, keeping the pin, and also it's been played by John Nunn, so it must be good. g4, breaking that pin once again, and now if black meekly retreats, the knight moves and black's got big problems here. So knight takes g4, fight fire with fire. We accept the sacrifice, h takes g4, bishop takes, and now the key move, knight bd2, stay calm. E takes f3. Let's have a look at this position, because this is critical. We've got a king in the centre, but on the other hand, our pawns on c5 and b4 stop black really developing quickly. White can continue in this position, for example, with bishop d3. And now that releases this rook to come out to e1. So it's not all plain sailing for black. For example, knight c6, rook e1 check. And now bishop e7 preserves the right of black to castle, so it makes sense. And for example, now the French GM Raylange against Nunn played king c2, really putting his king to safety. There's no rush. Nunn responded with a6. He's probably frightened about b5 at some point. Bishop e4 makes sense. Rook c8. But let's give him another headache. a4. Once again, a typical feature of these endings. a4 threatening b5 and at c-pawn rushing to victory and promotion. In the game, Nunn had a good long think of his point and played h5, setting up his own passed pawn. Now at this point Relange admitted he went wrong, but he does recommend a much improved line from his actual move, which is bishop a3. He now recommends knight c4, activating his pieces once more. And he rightly believes that white's better. After king f8, for example. Why king f8? Well, let's try h4. What happens next? Well, all sorts of grisly moves are available here, but one of the best is knight d6, check, hitting the king and rook. Black has to take it, but at this point white can unleash a rather strong move. Bishop takes c6 check, and not only check, it's double check, so the king has to move. Check from rook e1, and of course bishop on c6. So for example, king f8, and then that bishop rampages a little bit more. Bishop takes b7, not only hitting the rook, but now the bishop's on pre. So the rook attacks the bishop, and it goes on its merry way, taking another pawn. I think black's best move here would be to leave the building as soon as possible. King f8 to get rid of a pin on the e-file seems obligatory. Now in this position, Relange just says it's good for white with the idea of b5. And I must admit, he looks quite right, but there's also other ideas here. And I particularly like bishop f4, because you never know, that h-pawn does look like it's steaming through, but if in doubt, even if it does get to its desired square, we can just block it. No need to worry. It looks good, but it doesn't do anything. What I like about this position is that with the bishop on f4, this idea of knight d6 has even stronger presence. For example, here, when black is obliged to take, we've got bishop takes d6 check, the king hides in the corner, and b5, and that pawns are rolling. In this peculiar case, there's no point counting the pawns. The reason is because this rook here is not in the game, because the king can't move to f8 because of the bishops, and even h7 is blocked. So really it's stuck in this little corner. Whereas on the queen's side, the two white bishops work as a pair and dominate everything. With b7 under pressure and 4 pawns against 2 on the queen's side, it's my bet that it's white who will promote first. And remember, that h-pawn's not really going anywhere. The line commencing with knight c6 is an interesting idea by Gallagher. Of course all his followers will instantly play it also. However, after knight f3, it merely transposes to our other lines, and it only retains its individual character by following exactly what Gallagher recommends. His idea is c takes d4, c takes d4, and now e5, hitting out in the centre once again. Now that queen's exposed, let's attack it. Knight c3, bishop b4, bishop d2, and now instead of e takes d4, it's amazingly, I've seen a few times, and when the queen leaves the board, so does the person rather quickly. Simply bishop takes c3. This is all standard stuff. People play it all the time, no need to worry about little tricky lines somewhere else. e4, knight e5, knight takes, and d takes e5. Now of course, if black simply takes, then the ending isn't too great because this e-pawn is not really defended. To get around this, black is always treading a thin line between a loss and a victory, so he has to play very carefully. Knight e7. Now this is the point when we differ from Gallagher's analysis. In his book, he recommends moving a queen away to various places. I think you should play bishop e2. This quiet move has been played quite a few times by Baklan, the young Ukrainian grandmaster, and more importantly, he's also won an awful lot of games with it. And this is the reason why the whole line is slowly but surely going out of popularity. The fact is, those who study the top games played in the world will know this, but I wouldn't mind betting your average opponent won't. After castle, we castle as well. again it's this pawn. He's got to defend it. Swaps the queens, white's got 2 bishops, and this lovely pawn. Now at the moment, we don't want to exchange queens because the knight in the centre might well cause a few problems. So we're biding our time. So black plays bishop f5, all fine and dandy. Queen a4. And now of course, the number 1 sport with the c3 Sicilian, attacking that queen. So we're not only threatening to move our rook into the centre, given the right moment, maybe even bishop c4. Black's got to respond actively to this simple idea. So knight c6. Rook fd1 hits the queen. It moves. Rook ac1. Why not keep going for that queen? Rook fd8. Looks sensible. And now queen b5. At last, we offer our queen again. So why do we do it now? Well, the reason soon becomes clear. It's because if the queens are exchanged, queen takes, bishop takes b5. We've still got our 2 bishops, but more importantly, we also have a rook on the d file, which means, given a moment's notice, we can play a key move, which is rook d6. And the idea is simply to double. But if black takes, rook takes d6, we get rid of our, well, kind of maybe weak e-pawn, and now it's a strong passed pawn, and that's the big difference. Ably supported by a pair of bishops and a rook, things look a bit bleak for black. Therefore, black is in no mood to enter the ending just yet, so he defends b7, and his queen of course, with queen e7. And now once again a key move, rook d6. Give yourself a pat on the back if you found that one. Again, the idea is to double the rooks, but in this case there's a little trick. If he takes immediately, rook takes d6, then e takes d6, and not only do we have our strong passed pawn, but he can't even take it. Queen takes d6 invites complete disaster. There's a bishop hanging. Queen takes f5. Whoops. Faced with this domination of a d-file, black thinks, well, okay, let's just get out of the way. Because after rook cd1, you can't actually go to d7 because it's covered by the bishop. However, that's not really the way to play it. After rook ac8, white brings up another one of his trumps, g4. Excellent stuff. Bishop has to go back, and now, dinky little move, queen a4, almost the end of the game, because at long last we've got doubled our rooks, got the pawn on g4, a key move often played, and more importantly, this pawn is going off the board. Knight f6 is one of the main moves against the c3 Sicilian. Its object is clear, attacking the e-pawn. Now of course we could defend it, not very adventurous, so we continue in the style we've become accustomed to, aggressive. e5, hitting the knight. Knight d5, d4. Once again, if in doubt, play d4. Now, of course you're threatening c4 followed by d5, or even just simply d takes c5. So black has to act quickly, and the standard and almost automatic response is c takes d4. This is where our paths cross with other books on this variation, because although most of them recommend knight f3, queen takes d4 is also acknowledged as a good move. It's been played by a number of leading players, and the results in general are favourable for white. Now the big difference is, this line just isn't played that often, so normally black enters with this variation only having met it once or twice, whereas white, who no doubt has plenty of experience, will already be in the driving seat, because he knows that although the queen's exposed, black's attempts to attack it generally end in ruin. The normal move here is e6, defending the knight naturally enough, and white carries on with getting his pieces out. Knight f3. Knight c6 comes, attacking the queen. Queen e4. Now this is a position which is probably critical to the whole line. Black has to think of something good to play. Now, d6 is what we're going to look at here. Natural enough, attacking the e5 pawn. And of course, if white takes it, which I don't recommend, bishop takes d6 allows black to castle quickly, and frankly, white at best has just got an equal position. The move I recommend, and for good reason counting the number of white victories, is bishop b5, maintaining the pressure and allowing black to sort out the problems. Now the pin on the knight means that taking on e5 isn't that great after knight takes e5, because you're just piling up pressure on the c6 knight, which is pinned. The automatic move by black is bishop d7, cutting out the pin immediately. Now, it would seem at this position that, it's sort of, equalish, maybe white's got initiative, but in fact black is under big pressure here, because after c4, it starts going downhill. Knight b6, white responds with e takes d6, bishop takes d6, castle. And the point is that white is preparing rook d1, and not only is he hitting the bishop on d6, but the queen is now going to be pinned against his own bishop, inviting trouble. Therefore, he has to do something quick. And the standard move in this position is to try and force that niggly, tiresome bishop out of the way with a6. It looks good, but by golly, we've got another move. Rook d1. Ignore it. That bishop on d6 is much more important. The common move now is queen c7, just to defend the piece. But of course, you want to know what happens when someone grabs your bishop. Well, the easiest way is just to simply take back. C takes b5. And now, the pin is still awkward, so perhaps knight d5 can be played. Or can it? Well, what happens after rook takes d5? I think it's going home early again. Okay, so queen c7, natural move, looks good. That bishop on b5 is a bit embarrassed perhaps. If we take on c6, black can recapture the bishop. So what to do? Now, of course, if you're playing someone, they might be quite chuffed with this position, especially having spent the last 1.5 hours trying to find the right moves. But in fact, it's to all no avail. You can just flash out knight c3 and sit back and enjoy it. And what is going on here? Well, a takes b5, knight takes b5, and suddenly the queen is rather embarrassed, because not only is it attacked, but more importantly, this bishop's going to go next move. White is clearly better. In this game between Stein of Germany and Eric Birmingham from France, black responded in only one way, by panicking. Knight e5, trying to get out of the mess. And then white had a rather nice combination. Knight takes e5, bishop takes e5, and now it looks like the dust has settled here. But, yet again, white's initiative marches forward. c5, crafty little move there. What can be done? Well, if queen takes c5, bishop b3 is curtains, because not only is the knight on b6 hanging, but this bishop will be hanging soon as well. For example, queen here, defending both, it seems. Temporary measure. Bishop takes b6. Queen takes. Oops, bishop d7 check. King moves. And just for fun, why not have another piece? Queen takes e5. The position is looking a bit murky for black, so it might make sense to take on b5. So what happens if he does? A takes b5. Well, we want our piece back, so let's grab this little knight here. C takes b6. Now if a queen moves, then simply h3, white's doing fine. But black tends to be greedy in these positions. What happens after bishop h2 check? A sort of reoccurring theme in this position, really. King moves. The point is that that bishop's not really going very far, because after a queen b8, f4, and now if the bishop's embarrassed, it has to get away. Bishop g3. Is it surviving? Almost. Queen d3. Suddenly g3 is not the problem. Bishop on d7 is. It's over and out for black. Having had a good look at the alternatives, it's not surprising that black tried to make his own way in this position. And it's also not surprising he didn't get very far. Bishop takes b5. Natural enough. And now c takes b6. I think we've seen this one sort of thing before. Even more so after bishop takes h2 check. King moves. I think I can see what you're going to say. Where's that bishop going? Well, queen e5. And now simply queen h4. The bishop is lost, so black resigned. After e6, knight f3, knight c6, queen e4. Black's had a good look around for some improvements. Now d6 might be obvious, but it hasn't worked out. So f5 is now in vogue. Once again the queen has to move, in my opinion, because if we take on f6, it just seems to encourage black to attack you a bit more, and resolves a few of the problems. Therefore, it's better just to move it back. Queen e2. Now at first sight it looks a bit odd what to do with this bishop, but in fact we're going to fianchetto it on the king's side, so that won't be a problem. But more importantly, what's black going to do? Well, there's no obvious direct attack, is there? So he has to be rather patient, which Sicilian players hate. So for example, if we take this as our starting point, a little bit of pressure on this e-pawn is what they normally play. Queen c7. Well, we know the plan now. If in doubt, g3. The most consistent move for black is to hit that e-pawn. So knight d e7 is played. Knight a3. And now, of course, the threat of knight b5 is rather strong. Now, occasionally, if you're really lucky, people ignore it and continue with g6, with the idea of bishop g7. But it's a complete calamity. For example, knight b5, queen moves out the way to b8, for example, knight d6 check, and not only does black give up the right to castle, but after king d8, he even gives up his rook. Knight g6 is natural and best. Not only does the bishop cover the d6 square, but the e-pawn is under attack. Knight b5, queen retreats so it keeps an eye on e5. And now bishop f4. A key move people don't really understand at first. Why allow the bishop to be taken? Well, in reality they don't even take it, because if knight takes f4, g takes f4, then that pawn is forever secure here. White has a rather pleasant choice of, for example, castling queenside and starting a rather strong kingside attack for rook g1, and if, for example, something like g6, throw in h4 and see your opponent squirm. That knight is a terrible hindrance on b5 to all the pieces. The queen doesn't want to stay on b8 forever, so a6 tends to be played. Knight bd4. Now the fact is, even if you don't know or can't remember, more likely, the theory here, it doesn't matter. Black hasn't really got any tricks. And more importantly, white's got all the space, so if you can't remember, natural moves are fine, because there's no secret trick which only grandmasters know in this position. Plain and simple, white's got a space advantage and black's hanging on, but it's still close. Let's look at this game played between Shigan and Horvath. Knight takes d4. Of course we return the compliment. Knight takes d4. b5. He has to get his queenside bishop out somehow. Okay, we just carry on developing. Bishop b7 and castle. There's still time to have a look around. What's happening here? Well, black is still... well, he's hanging on, but he hasn't really got any counterplay as such, except to white to prove that there's an advantage. Now, there's a few ideas here. Of course, bishop takes g2 is possible. King takes. Queen b7. Black went for the ending with queen takes queen. After king takes queen, white enjoyed a rather more better ending. But why? Well, after bishop e7, for example, there's various tricks to try and open up the queenside with a4. In fact, white was even more adventurous and played h4. The idea is not really a mini revolution on the king side, but merely that if knight takes f4, you can be cheeky enough even to take back with the king and not have to fear about g5. Factors to watch out for. This knight is strong on d4. You've got a queenside majority with 3 pawns against 2, so therefore in theory it's easier to make a pass pawn, because the king over here controls the kingside explosion of pawns, whereas on the queenside white can concentrate and trying to get the most important pawn, a passed pawn. Gallagher has also considered this position, but this time from black's point of view, and after bishop e7, rook fd1, castle. After rook d3 he considered white's position to be slightly better. The ideas are fairly obvious. White wants to bring his rook across and put pressure on this backward weak pawn on d7. Of course not everyone's going to know the right move. So what happens if they just play their own personal idea? Well, Ian Rogers, the Australian GM, got as far as here when his opponent, Greg Canfor, produced b6. Most natural move in the world. Why not? Get your pieces out. So what to do in this position? Well, there's no point working out various intricate variations. You have to go with your plan. As we saw in the previous game, the plan with the queen on e2 is to fianchetto. So that's what he did. g3. It's easy when you know how. Bishop b7. Bishop g2. Bishop e7. Each player's developing. But the point is, it's white who's got more space. Let's see what happens. Castle. Castle. And now rook d1. A key move, it seems, in these lines. The point is to put pressure on that backward d7 pawn at some point. Queen e8. And now, once again, c4. A bid for more space. That knight is a bit annoying on d5, so let's kick it out of the way. We don't want it around. Humbly it had to go back to c7. But wait a minute. Well, how about knight b4? Keep it active. Well, unfortunately, it gives us a chance to build up a rather impressive pawn formation. a3. Only one square. b4. It's looking horrible. We're threatening b5. And this knight on the edge might well have to retreat to c7 where it could have gone in one go. Knight c7. The knight gets out of the way of the attack, but unfortunately for black, his whole position needs a bit of an examination. Just look at it. He's played the Sicilian to attack, and now he's just defending. What can be solved by this? Well, it's not obvious where he's going to get counterplay. Because, for example, after knight c3, it's white who's smoothly developing, and it's black, with moves like rook d8, as played, to defend the d7 pawn. He's just waiting to see what happens. Bishop f4. An important move, because now if d6, you can simply take it, because you've got a bishop and rook behind it. So therefore, black looks elsewhere. How to get rid of that bishop on f4? Well, h6. That looks good, but no, h4 to stop it in one go. Queen h5. This looks fine for black. He's going to play g5, bit of a counter attack. That's what he wants. So what happens next? Well, totally ignores him. a3. Unbelievable. But the thing was, after some consideration, black realised he had absolutely nothing to do, and even had the embarrassment of playing bishop a8, just watching things happen. So what happened? Why not g5? That looks more like it. However, there's a trick. H takes g5. H takes g5. All going swimmingly, it seems. But now knight takes g5. Oops. Pawn goes off the board. Job done. Queen takes queen. Knight takes. And black finds himself a clear pawn down, and with no prospects for the ending. Basically, this is fan-dabby-dozy for white. He's got everything from the opening. He's got more space. The idea of b4 is going to come next move. The d7 pawn is still under pressure. He's going to double rooks maybe. Simply rook d2, rook underneath. And what has black got to show for it? Nothing, basically. All he can do is wait. In conclusion, queen takes d4 does offer white excellent chances. Okay, you have the space advantage, the attacking chances, but more importantly, in my opinion, is that black simply doesn't know what to do. It's not the main line, it's slightly obscure, but the thing is, it's got a good pedigree, it's been played by excellent players, and more importantly, the plan in the middle game is easy to follow. e6 is also a favourite move of players who don't really know what they're doing against the c3 Sicilian. It's not that they don't know, but they just want to play solid. Now this is all very well, but after the familiar move, d4, they also have to have a rather large memory, because after d5 they have to be able to counter e5 with the advanced French. Now of course we don't want to play the advanced French from this position because it's a whole new video. So let's go for e takes d5. Now of course if queen takes d5 then we transpose the variations considered earlier. So let's look at e takes d5, which is the main line. Knight f3, knight c6, bishop b5. Well, this is kind of straightforward, isn't it? Basically white's idea is to castle kingside, take on c5 at the right moment, and then play against this isolated and rather vulnerable d-pawn. In this game between Ivanchuk and Shirov, two world-class players, black tried bishop d6, which is the normal move. White continued with castle. Now knight g7. Of course if knight f6 then maybe we can play rook e1 check. If it's defended with bishop e6 then knight g5 increases the pressure on black. Knight ge7 is normal and cuts out any checks from the e-file. Now how to make progress? Well, we're going after the isolated d-pawn, so d takes c5. Bishop takes. Knight bd2. Well, white's plan is simply to play knight b3 and then knight d4 to secure this pawn firmly on d5. And then, if we wave a magic wand, we'll be able to move our bishop out of the way, for example, to g5. Put queen underneath, rook here, and then contemplate moving this knight away, and once again threatening the d-pawn. Now Shirov, never one to contemplate a quiet life, banged out bishop g4. The pin looks awkward for white, but of course that's only if the queen stays on d1. But Ivanchuk just whopped it out to a4, and not only has he got pressure on c6, the slight problem of queen takes bishop to watch out for. Naturally he moves it, bishop h5. That's not enough. In this new twist to an old line, queen h4 comes across, once more hunting it down. Bishop g6, and now, having got rid of that nasty customer on g4, we can get on with our plan. Knight b3. Bishop in this case comes to b6, and now we can play knight bd4, firmly securing the isolated pawn on d5, which is of course part of our plan. Castle and bishop e3. White has a really promising position here. He's got the isolated d-pawn to attack, the queen's over on the king's side, and indeed Ivanchuk built up a winning position. It would be great to say it ended in smiles all round. In fact, Ivanchuk blundered and allowed Shirov to escape with a draw. Now after d4, there's always a few people who think they know better than white. And one of these ideas that they find is c takes d4. C takes d4. And only now do they play d5. Now of course this changes the situation somewhat, because we don't really want to take on d5, because they've already compromised themselves. And the reason why is that now it is possible to play e5 and get away with it, because it's not really a pure advanced French. The difference is, in a normal advanced French, there's a pawn on c3, and black does his utmost to maintain the central tension before taking on d4. There's a good reason for this, and that reason is this rather handily placed knight which can now come out to c3 almost immediately, and that's the difference. Of course you might argue a bigger difference is that black's now walked into an advanced French and hasn't got a clue. My own experience in this line gave me a lot of pleasure, because not only did I get a chance to play knight c3 early, but I also got a chance to wipe my opponent off the board. He came up with an interesting idea, namely g6, which even looking at it now, isn't really that great, but it does get you out of the main lines. So how to respond? Well, let's get that knight out, that's for a start. Knight c3. Black played knight c6, sensible stuff. And now knight f3. Well, it's easy for white to develop, but how about black? Well, sensing I might put my bishop on b5, or even if he expected bishop g7 might be taken apart by knight b5, he decided to play a6. I decided it's time to take the initiative, time to get going, time to teach him a lesson. h4, let's get on with it. My Dutch opponent played h5. It seems sound enough, but now bishop g5 puts the question to those dark squares around the king. Bishop e7 to block out the threats, but queen d2 maintains the tension. And the point is, what's he going to do? My plan's easy enough. I can play bishop d3, castle queenside, and start looking for a few attacks. Who knows, maybe rook here to g1 and g4. Now nobody wants to sit around and wait to be obliterated, so my opponent found an ingenious but flawed idea. He decided to branch out with f5. Now that looks solid enough, except of course if you just take it. Unfortunately that's what I did. Knight takes. Now bishop d3 poses a big question. What to do about this very vulnerable pawn here? Now king f7 is an admission of guilt, isn't it? You can't do that. So with a straight face, he played rook g8, whereupon the key is not to start laughing, in my experience, but to stay calm, play normal moves, and such ugly moves will eventually be punished. So I just played castle queenside, bishop d7, rook h e1, and had a very, very comfortable position where, after a mere 21 moves, ended in victory. Why is white better? Well, basically, I've got all my pieces in play, and more importantly, this backward e-pawn is a right pain for black to defend against. The rook on g8 is obliged to defend on g6. Frankly, black is in deep trouble here. The idea of 2d6 is to avoid theory. However, the surprise value has somewhat diminished over the years. White, of course, continues with d4. And now black plays knight f6. Now the move I'm going to recommend is surely the strongest. Bishop d3 to maintain the centre. Now you might wonder why this sideline by black has been so popular in the past. Now the main reason can be traced back to a recommendation to play, instead of bishop d3, d takes c5, and then after knight c6 to go pawn grabbing with c takes d6. This was once recommended, but now it's deemed to be losing by force. After knight takes e4, d takes e7, queen takes d1 check, king takes of course, knight takes f2 check, king e1, knight takes h1. The complications end up favouring black. Don't play it. In this game, Michael Adams takes on the white pieces against his arch rival Gelfand. Gelfand's aim is to chip away at the centre, and he started this with c takes d4. Took back, and now g6 to try and develop his bishop. Michael continued by bringing his knight out to c3, bishop g7, and now a dinky little move which I like, h3. Well, there's nothing like being prepared. He wants to play knight f3, but maybe he's afraid of bishop g4, so he takes time out to stop it. Castle, and now the knight comes out to f3. Sensible stuff. Look at it now, already both knights are out, the bishops on d3, we have a pawn centre on e4 and d4 controlling spaces. Now against your average opponent, they're likely to go astray here. Black's still got to find a plan. Black tried e5 to contest the centre. d takes e5, d takes e5. White castles to bring his rook into the game. And now knight c6 to defend that pawn, just in case. And the point is, in this position, it's easy for white to play. Black still has to cope with white's extra development. Bishop e3. Bishop e6, just to continue developing. And now Adams demonstrates his queenside superiority. Bishop b5. Threatening to take on c6 if necessary to wreck the pawn structure. And more importantly, demonstrating that his bishop on e3 is directed against the queenside, whereas black's bishop is a good safety piece, but not really taking part in the game as such. Knight a5. Queen e2. And it's white who is in the driving seat here. He's got all the chances on the queen side. That's where the real action lies. White's better. Now there's always going to be the smart aleck who won't take on d4 immediately. So what do we do then? Well, knight c6 poses the question, well. Do we stop floundering and wondering how to defend d4? Well no, we could just keep to our plan as usual. Knight f3. Good stuff this. But what happens when it's pinned? The most natural move in the world. Bishop g4. After all, we haven't played our early h3. But is it a disaster? Well, the resounding answer is no. Because you simply played d5. And at first glance, what's the most tempting, obvious move for black? Yep, put your hands up. Knight e5. There you go. Not only hitting the bishop here, but the knight's completely pinned. Now you can enjoy yourself by playing the staggering knight takes e5 and just giving it the queen for what appears to be nothing. Your opponent eager as ever. Bishop takes d1. And now the reason why we're sacrificing our pieces here. Bishop b5 check. This looks grim. The king can't move anywhere, so black's obliged to block. Knight d7. And we just hack it off the board. Bishop takes d7 check. Well, queen takes as obliged. Knight takes d7. A lot of exchanges here. King takes. And around this point, black will have to start counting the pieces. And there's something missing. An entire piece. White's completely won. After d5, black's got to find something else. And the most obvious move is bishop takes f3. Queen takes f3. Knight e5. Which looks good, because I mean you can take on d3 next move. Or so it seems. But bishop b5 checks turns the tables. Because now white can preserve the bishop pair and have a very pleasant game. Knight fd7. Followed by queen e2. And white's a lot better. Already he's threatening f4, kicking that knight away. And if a6, then just simply bishop a4, intending to reroute to c2 before playing castle, f4, and attack. White's better. At this stage it's time to look at one of the more comical moves. Queen a5. What's going on here? Well, as I outlined earlier, the idea is actually quite straightforward, because if d4, c takes d4, and we can't take the pawn. Bang goes our centre. So what to do? Well, one ingenious idea is to play a3. It looks completely mad, but it works, because the idea is to play d4 if he does nothing, c takes d4, and then b4, ably supported by the pawn on a3, queen b6, and c takes d4 when we have all the fun. Going to play knight c3 next to come to d5, attacking the queen yet again. And it's much more easy to develop. Knight f3, and these big pawns in the centre are black's undoing. Now black's got a dilemma how to proceed without looking rather silly. Well, if logic dictates the game, e5's the move, and this has indeed been played. Now of course the idea here is that when you play d4, black can take with the e-pawn, and once again the centre has been destroyed. But there's a problem with this, because if we take this move back, black's position looks kind of odd. Not only is there queen on a5, but the pawns on c5 and e5 leave a big gap on d5. How to exploit it? Well, the best way is to preliminarily bring out your knight. Now the piece developed, hitting the e-pawn. Black responds, knight c6, and now the reason and the cause of black's downfall. Bishop c4, and all of a sudden it's obvious there's a big problem, because this pawn on f7 is weak, and the queen on a5, what is it doing here? I don't know. What happens next? Bishop e7 looks sensible, developing, but now, having stopped knight g5, white comes up with queen b3, once again hitting that vital pawn here. Knight h6, only move to defend. And now d4. We don't care anymore, because it's this little trap we're after here. What to do now for black? Well, basically it's not looking good. The only one way to get around it is to try and hang on to as much material as possible. So c takes d4 was played. But after bishop takes h6, obvious and good, g takes h6. Right, grab the pawn, bishop takes f7 check. The king moves, and then after castle, we can stand back and have a look at the position. The black king on d8 is awful. Not only is it unsafe, but more importantly, the rooks on h8 and a8 are completely uncoordinated. It would take ages to try and get them back into the game. Okay, black might have material quality, but who wants these double pawns over here? White can continue with knight bd2, and knight c4 looks rather ominous for black already. All in all, looking at the disarray of black's position, I would say that white is close to winning already. 2b6 tends to be played by people who aren't really up to the latest theory, but feel they want to play something kind of solid. In many ways, they seem to think it's a cousin of the Owens defence, which occurs after 1 e4 b6. But frankly, after this game, you can be assured it's a very distant cousin. After d4, as usual, black plays bishop b7. Hitting the e-pawn. Well, let's defend it. Bishop d3. It's done as well in the lines with 2d6, so we can play it here. Black continues, knight f6. Now we have to defend the e-pawn. Queen e2. Now, c takes d4, once again hitting at the centre. And now knight c6. Rather quick for my liking. Perhaps e6 can be played. But if so, knight f3 is sensible. Then after knight c6, we can play a3 to stop knight b4, which preserves the bishop on d3 from attack, and white can continue with castle, giving him not only a pleasant game, but certainly a more adventurous one, because it's so easy to continue with knight c3, bishop g5, and little threats like e5 are on the horizon, not only to hit this pinned knight, but to unleash this bishop on d3 against h7. All in all, white is better. That was a quick look at e6, but now I want to show you the game Janowski-Coleman from Hastings, and what a game it is. Black tried to be crafty at this point and played knight c6. There's only one way to treat mistakes in the opening, and that's to punish them. So white went on the offensive, d5, hitting that knight immediately. The knight comes to b4, but after bishop c4, suddenly it's not so clear anymore what's black up to. He had great visions of taking on d3, but now the knight on b4 is looking a little bit silly. In fact, even as we speak, a3 is next move if possible. How to confront this problem? Queen c7 was played, and the idea is simply that along the c file, the c1 bishop is hanging if a bishop moves. So after a3, knight a6 can just about be played, because if a bishop takes, watch it, queen c1 check, and it's white who's going to have to resign. Therefore, the knight hopped out to a3. But there's one point we have to remember here. Black is incredibly cramped. His knight on b4 is not going anywhere, but more importantly, his king is still stuck in the centre. What happens next? Rook c8. Continue to try and get some play over on the queen side. Judging from our previous games, knight f3. Simple development, intending to castle. e6 at long last. But we castle anyway, we don't mind. Bishop c5, activating that bishop at long last. But is it so easy? That queen's exposed. White attacks it. Sensible and good. With a7 and c7 under attack, queen b8 looks obvious. But now we start pushing black back. a3. Only one move, knight a6. But it gets worse. b4. Black once again is on the defensive. Not even defensive, but he's on the run. Bishop b7. And now, sneaky but good, d6. Where's that bishop going to? Well, the obvious is to take on d6. However, that loses immediately. Knight takes d6 check. Queen takes. And now, you have a rather pleasant choice. Bishop takes a6, winning a whole piece for nothing. It's embarrassing, but the bishop returns to its original square, f8, with some vague idea of taking here at some point. But black has no time for this, because white cements that pawn on d6 with e5, hitting the knight as well. Bishop d5, hoping for complications. He can hope no longer after bishop d3. After bishop takes f3, queen takes f3, black failed to play knight d5. And there's good reason why as well. Because after knight d5, bishop e4, the knight cannot escape white's attention. For example, queen b7, rook d1 sets up a rather menacing attack, which frankly there's not much to do about. Knight b8, for example, looks feasible. But now, rook takes d5 and we're having fun here. E takes d5, bishop takes d5, hitting the queen and the vulnerable f7 square. The queen moves, a6, and now this is where we storm through. Queen takes f7 check, king moves, bishop g5, and you can start laughing. Sensing that knight d5 is really not on, Coleman reluctantly brought his piece back to its original square. Wow, does that look amazing. It looks like black's hardly started. How to punish it? Well, remember that knight that came from b4 to a6? Well, now after bishop e4, black just couldn't find a move, because the threat is bishop b7 and take on a6. So amazingly, black was forced to resign. Game over. In this dreamlike position, all of black's pieces from a back rank, apart of course from the knight on a6, and that's the one we're going to take next. I can't guarantee that all your games will end in such style. However, I can promise you that the c3 Sicilian is an excellent practical choice and a shortcut to success.